I felt something come up like I was leaving my body. And I couldn't scream for anybody to call 911. I couldn't scream for help. I couldn't talk. There was nothing.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to What the 50, a podcast for women of a certain age. I'm super excited because today I have the amazing Renay Brown on deck with us here. Hi, Renay.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for being here today as my special guest. I am excited to introduce you to our audience because you are not only a woman of a certain age, which I like to, all my podcast guests are women our age-ish, just sharing their life stories, sharing their experiences, sharing what's worked for them, what hasn't, and then big events in their lives that have caused change and caused them to pivot and do something new, and the success that you've achieved through all of that. You have a great story. I just want you to go ahead and give us a little bit of background. I know you come from law enforcement. I know you have a degree in social work. I know you've done extensive volunteering and coaching, and you love helping people. Just kind of go into that for a few minutes. Give us your background and your story a little bit to set the stage, if you don't mind.
Okay, yes, Cindy. As you said, I've been in human services for well over 25 years. Before I was in law enforcement, I actually worked in foster care. So I've always helped people, and I've always wanted to help people improve their lives.
Mhm.
After I was in law enforcement for 18 and a half years, I was a parole officer. Well, 3 years of that, I was in the prison. So I worked inside the prison as a guard and as a sergeant.
Yeah, I
And
bet
then
you've got some stories.
oh my, I have lots of stories.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine doing that job.
Some of them are fun though. Some stories are funny stories.
Okay. Okay.
Everything in life is not always sadness, but I don't know how many law enforcement people you know. Well, law enforcement people have a very weird sense of humor.
Yes. My husband is a retired homicide detective.
Okay, so
So I totally get it.
you
Totally.
totally get it. Stuff that we find funny, most of the world goes, "You're laughing at that?"
Yeah.
But yes.
And that's
So
like a defense mechanism, right?
it really is, but so much of it you can't believe what people do.
Right. Yeah.
So in those professions, in foster care and in law enforcement, I was a catalyst in developing programs. Even I started the community service department in law enforcement. I was like, these parolees have nothing to do, they need to
Right.
clean. So
Oh, okay. Interesting. So your experience in law enforcement obviously gave you a lot of insight and wisdom, probably, and how you apply that to your life today. I know today you're a realtor.
yeah.
So what are you doing now just besides real estate? And what have you brought with you from law enforcement that has enabled you to do what you do today?
So I was a real estate agent 2 years before I ended my law enforcement career. And I ended that because I broke my arm in several places, had to have a couple surgeries. And so I folded full time over into real estate
Okay.
after the doctor said, you can no longer do that job.
Right.
I actually lead an exciting life. Had a lot of loss in my life. So this has led me to my new project,
Which is your ebook?
my ebook and online course.
Okay.
And it's called Living with Loss, Let Them Rest in Peace, or RIP.
So dive into that a little bit because you've dealt with so much loss. I mean, it's painful, obviously, but you can give a couple of examples of the loss you've experienced, but how exactly do you really help people get over that? Because I mean, it's devastating.
Well, so in the book, I give tips on things that people can do. I've done extensive research But just to back up, even in foster care, I never had a child on my caseload die, but children died.
Ooh, yeah,
And
that's
even
tough.
one year in my parole career, I had 12 parolees die. And some of them had no family to identify them. So, of course,
Oh,
I had to identify them. But then I interviewed a lot of professional people like pastors, imams. I even talked to a secular humanist. Just wanted to know, how does everyone in every sector of life deal with death? Oh, on a professional level, I've talked to chaplains. I talked to my own pastor who recently lost his father.
mm-hmm.
And so I ask questions, how do you deal with it? What I discovered though was everybody deals with loss differently. And then it depends on who you lose
Right.
as to how you deal with it.
And sometimes it can I imagine, be complicated because if you lose somebody in your life that maybe you have falling out with, or you're not that close with anymore, the grieving process can look a little different and maybe be unexpectedly tricky or whatever. I'm sure you've dealt with all of this.
So I dealt with it on a professional level and on a personal level. So that reminded me when my brother passed away.
Mhm.
Our mother died, maybe she died 10 years ago. I'm trying to think. I actually think he died of COVID. He died in 2018 at the end. But everything they're talking about COVID now sounds
He had
like
this,
he had it.
yeah,
They even put him on a ventilator and then he died. He got
yeah.
better. They put him on a ventilator and he died. But about a year or two before he died, well, right after my mom died, he wouldn't even speak to me.
Oh, really?
The family dynamics when people die changes.
Yes, yes.
And then if you're the caregiver, I have a person going through that now. If you're the caregiver, somehow you get blamed for the death.
Interesting. Huh.
Yes.
So your mom died, your brother died, you navigated both of those, but then you had a very tragic loss.
Woo.
Yeah.
So that one, well, there's two.
Okay.
The easiest one was my aunt. I was closer to her than my own mom. She died just this past June.
Did she raise
So
you, Renee?
no,
No.
but she was my grandmother was the main caregiver. She died about 20 years ago. And
Okay.
that one, I don't even think I've ever cried. Some people
Right.
cry and get over. My mom passed, I never cried. Um, I wasn't very close to my mom, but of course, in times in my life, um, I just didn't grieve her the way I did so let me back up and say this. My sister and I lived together for right after, because she lived with my grandmother when my grandmother passed, and she was 18. So she came to live with me. She was pregnant. So she had a baby. And it was she was my sister's only child. My
Okay.
sister only had one, and I raised four. So we were crowded in the house,
So you have three boys,
and one girl.
and the girl is your niece that you raised.
No,
Oh,
no.
okay. Got
Okay,
it.
no. My niece is my sister's child. She passed away 3 years ago, but my niece had a troubled life.
Okay, but you did
And
raise your niece.
yes,
Gotcha.
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And she passed away 3 years ago. She had a troubled life. She went between myself and my sister. She went back and forth, back and forth. And she had a very troubled life. As a teenager, she lived with me, and then she lived with her mom, and then she lived on the street. And so she died 3 years ago. 5 years ago, she went home to live with her mom. She got her life really good. She was working a job. She happened to be standing at a bus stop on her way to work. Some guy had a heart attack. hit the bus stop, and the bus stop fell on her and broke her neck.
So
And so,
random.
it's so random, and it was across the street from a high school. Some the kids hadn't got out of school yet, but one little boy was standing there. The bus stop fell on him. It only broke his leg.
Holy cow. So
Yes,
she was in the process of getting her life back together. She was
absolutely.
making progress. You had hope for her. You were excited for her future, and bam, gets
Yes.
hit by a car driven by a man who had a heart attack. I mean, that is so random.
So random. And from reports from the police and the hospital, the guy had just left that hospital against their wishes
Oh my gosh.
and had a heart attack and died on his way home.
And she was how old?
She was 26. She would
So
have been 27 had she lived till July 30th. She died in June. I think it was June 9th. Yesterday was her birthday. She would have been 30 years old.
okay. So this particular loss hit you hard, very hard. So tell us about, how you managed to get through that. And was this in particular the impetus for your ebook and what you do now?
This was the absolute catalyst for my ebook. You said your husband's in law enforcement. You think people in law enforcement have nerves of steel, and you think we never go through anything emotional.
Yeah.
And we kind of don't. We're pretty guarded.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us have a silly side, and I know I do.
Yeah.
I never felt anything like that till my niece died.
Really?
So my kids were all grieving. I had two of them that I didn't know how to help them. I was at a loss. Two of them. One of them called me and said, if I pass away, you're on my life insurance. I'm like, the day of the funeral. I'm like, what? The other one goes, well, I could just go to be with her and grandma. I said, what? This is the day of the funeral. I'm
That's a
like,
lot. Yeah.
what are you doing? I stayed at the hospital for 4 days with her. My sister only came 2. She said she couldn't handle it. And I get it. She couldn't handle it. So when she passed away, we donated her organs.
Mm-hmm.
The walk of, what do they call that? The walk of honor.
Yeah.
When you donate your organs.
Right. I know what you mean. Yep.
It was so beautiful. Oh my God, it was so beautiful. And there was like 30 of us there. And I went all the way through the surgery door. And the doctor turned around, he goes, ma'am, you can't go any further. He says, if you do, you'll have to scrub up. I said, oh my God. So I was fine. We planned the funeral. We had the funeral. After that, I shut completely down. Like down. Like nobody talked to me, nobody moved. I was in
How
the
long were you
bed
like that?
for about 5 or 6 weeks. I was in the bed. If I did not go to work, I would have still been in the bed. I stayed I never have I didn't even cry when she passed away, but after the whole thing was over,
Yeah.
I've never experienced anything like that.
So how'd you come out of it?
Well, I have a strong faith and I prayed a lot. I had friends calling me going, you're the strongest person I know. You got to stop. No, I don't have to do anything. I just want to lay here in the bed. And so I prayed a lot and I journal too. That's part of what I have in the ebook. I would journal and I didn't want to talk to anybody, not even my kids. I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be around people. I never experienced grief like that in my life. Again, I've lost siblings. I lost parents. I don't have any parents. I don't have grandparents. That was the worst grief ever.
I wonder, a question for you. Do you think sometimes that one incident can cause sort of a, if you go your whole life and you don't grieve when people die, and then someone else dies and maybe you start grieving very, very heavily, are you perhaps grieving everyone else you never grieved? Is it like the floodgates open and then suddenly you do all the grieving for everyone? I
So
don't know if I
I thought
explained
of
that
that.
right.
I thought, yeah, I know what you meant. I did think of that. Um, Siblings are a little different because they're closer to your age. And so then you think of your own mortality. But this is what I want to say, it's unnatural for a parent to bury a child.
Yes,
So that's what the difference was. Very unnatural.
I've never experienced that. I know people who have. Honestly, I cannot imagine. I can't wrap my mind around that kind of grief. Because you felt like
Well,
it was your own, right?
she was. She
Yeah,
really was.
yeah.
And that kind of grief is totally different. Now, interviewing people for the book, the one thing I cannot say I've ever experienced was the loss of a spouse.
Mm, yeah.
So I hear that's a whole different level. And I've talked to a couple of widows. I don't think I've talked to a widower, but I did talk to a couple widows. And that's a totally different grief as
Yeah.
well. What I hear is, well, you're grieving the other half of you, and you're also grieving that relationship while if you have children, you have to mind them because that's their parent.
Right.
So I've heard some stories. The one girl that I talked to that's a widow, she said that she moved out of the master bedroom
Mm,
for 6 months. And when she went back in there, the paint was peeling off the walls because there was no life in there.
wow.
I know. I was like, wow, that's deep. The other weird story. You want to hear a weird
Yeah.
story? Do you
Yes,
have your parents?
I have my mom.
Okay. So then you won't understand. You'll hear this story. This is a weird story. When my mom passed away, she had gone to hospice. So she was home though. And the
Okay.
hospice nurse, my sister was there with her and her friend. My hospice nurse, her hospice nurse, was going to visit her. My sister was she's kind of OCD. So if she ever sees this, she's going to go, yeah, I am OCD. She called me at work and she said, they haven't come. They haven't come to help, to give mom a bath. So when you get off, can you come help me give her a bath? I go, well, I don't get off till for 4 o'clock or whatever. She goes, she needs a bath now. She's almost like yelling at me. So, so I go, okay, let me finish what I'm doing here at work and I'll come and help. Well, I started to clean off my desk. I was sitting at my desk and I felt like I was going to pass out.
Hmm.
And I felt something this actually happened to me. I felt something come up like I was leaving my body.
Wow.
And I couldn't scream for anybody to call 911. I couldn't scream for help. I couldn't talk. There was nothing. Then the phone on my desk rang. It was the hospice nurse. And all I knew was, I said, she's gone, right? And she says, she can't, I guess they can't tell you that on the phone. She says, you need to get here.
Wow.
Yeah. So I talked to another friend who was a caregiver for her mom as well. And she said it's like the umbilical cord has been cut, even if you're, an aged adult.
Yeah. So you felt her leave.
Yeah, I did.
You felt her spirit or her soul leave.
I did. I actually did.
That's intense.
That was very intense.
How long did that last where you felt like you couldn't do anything?
Maybe a minute.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to pass out. Somebody should call 911. Couldn't speak, couldn't move, nothing.
Wow.
And then it passed. And then the phone
Did
rang.
you know before the phone rang, did you think that's my mom?
No,
You didn't, no.
I had
So
no
you knew
idea.
you were going there to give her a bath. You were, okay.
Yeah, so no. Until the phone rang, I'm like, okay,
Wow.
she's here. I'm going to go help give her a bath.
That's an incredible story. So given all these experiences that you've had with death and how you've come through it and stronger, and you've learned lessons, you've written this ebook to help other people. What are you're coaching now too, right?
Yes, yes,
Specifically on this topic, dealing
yes,
with grief.
yes. And we have a Facebook page.
What is that?
It's called Living with Loss, Let Them RIP.
Okay, so the same name as your ebook.
As the ebook. Yeah, I tried to make everything stay the same.
Okay, Living with Loss, Let Them RIP.
Yes.
Okay.
Because do you have another question?
No, keep going.
Because I know this lady, I live in Detroit.
Okay.
And so I know this lady, her husband was a local celebrity in our community. And she got married though, like, was it last year? I think she got married. She got married when she turned 80 last year.
Really?
Remarried. But her husband was a very, very well-known local celebrity.
Okay.
And she would always talk about him like he was still here. And I never met the man. And I've known her 15 years. And she would say stuff like, well, my husband would say so and so and this and that. And like, so at one point, a minister told her, and this is what stuck with me, when are you going to allow him to rest in peace?
Wow.
Yes. Every day, if I talked to her, his name came up. Her voicemail, I've heard people say widows. I don't think I've ever talked to, I talked to one widower, but not about this. Like one lady left his voicemail on the answering machine. Another lady said she couldn't move his clothes for a long time. And this is also in addition to the lady who said she went to the room, she said to start cleaning it out and the paint was peeling off the walls. Yeah.
So obviously people deal with it differently. Interesting. I mean, I don't know, for some people, maybe they need to hold on longer. I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert, but do you believe the healthiest thing to do is to process through it and to move on with your life because you're still living, right?
So a friend of my son's, one of my middle son, a friend of his, husband and wife they're his best friend. The husband and the wife are his best friend. Her mom died 2 years ago during COVID, at the height of COVID. And I don't think she died from COVID, but no, she didn't. She had cancer. And then her father died the year before. She has young children. And she was always, I can't live without my parents. And I had another relative say, when her mother was dying, she told her, go on and live for your children. Don't mourn me. And I told this girl the same thing. I said, don't rob your children of having you while you're grieving your parents, because it's not fair to them.
Yeah, that's very true. And you look at life is so short.
And precious.
Yeah, and death is, I mean, they say there's two things you can be certain of, death and taxes, right? Two things. The topic of death is like, we're all going to die. We all are. But we don't, for some reason, really believe that. At our age now, I think we're faced with our mortality a little bit more. It's one of the things, aging and dying is one of the topics that I, cover in my book and that I help coach women through. Because once you get into your 50s, your parents are aging and your parents are dying, which makes you look at your own mortality, right? And then you're like, okay, I need to look at things differently. Make the most of every minute. So would you say that that is sort of some of the theme of your coaching, to live in the here and now? Exactly,
because we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier, and I shouldn't say it's easier, but it appears to be easier when the person has a lengthy illness.
Yeah.
And you no longer want to watch them suffer. And people say, oh, I don't want to see them suffer. But then when they go, you still hold on to them. That's not fair. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. And it's not fair to the other people around you.
Mhm.
Yes, I say grieve. I was interviewing a widow, and she has a little, I put a little blurb of some people in the book. And she said her advice to, I think she said she was 36, 37 when her husband passed. I think she's 60 now. She never remarried. She said she missed out on a lot of good men because she compared them to her husband.
Yeah.
She said she would just always say, well, my husband wouldn't do it that way. And she said her advice to any widow is to grieve quickly and move on.
Mhm. I know
So,
the grieving period looks differently for everyone, but everyone pretty much needs to go through the stages of grief, correct?
correct.
And some go through different stages more quickly than others.
Absolutely. I have a real estate client that's a doctor, and she's kind of a friend because she's purchased a couple investment properties from me, and we still talk.
We make friends with our clients, don't we? I
We
mean,
do.
that's what we do. Yeah.
We really do. And speaking of that, I have a weird story about another one of my aunts and dying. She's alive, but so the doctor, I interviewed her. I said, what do doctors believe when people die?
Mm,
She said, we don't know what happens to people when they die. She said, there's no answer.
yeah.
But she also, and I watched the video, she also recommended a book, Five Stages of Grief.
Right.
And I watched the video. It was things that I learned. 'Cause my degree is in family life education / social work.
Okay.
And so I learned the different stages of life. And people, I don't even want to say anymore that because people live so much longer. I don't want to
Yeah.
say that people are in the fall of their life when they pass 50. I don't believe that anymore because my aunt that died in June, this is a funny story. I was very, very close to her. I'm very, very sad that she passed away. Um, Her older sister, she was 90, she would have been 95 this month. She would have been 95 in August 12th. But her older sister called me to tell me she passed away.
Hmm. Her
So
older sister.
her older sister called me
Wow.
to tell me she passed away.
Wow.
Because that sister lived in Chicago. This sister lives here in Detroit.
Yeah, we are definitely living longer.
So I don't want to say that when you're over 50, you're in the fall of your life because maybe not.
50 is kind of the new 35, actually.
It kind of is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if I take on the genes of my relatives, then
Yeah.
I'm still in the summer, maybe late summer, but
Late summer. Leaves are starting to fall a little bit, but that's it.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
born in late summer, so
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah.
Well, in wrapping this up, Renee, would you say that maybe our culture, because some cultures view death differently than we do in the Western world, our culture maybe needs to reframe death and how we look at it. It's simply a passing. It's simply a new stage of life as it is, right? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I interviewed a Indian person, and they view death a little different than us.
Yeah.
As Americans, when I was talking to the lady from the Atheist Society,
Mhm.
she said that she'd also talked to Indian people and people of other cultures. We warehoused all of our seniors when we can. We throw them in a nursing home, and her and I laugh. We call it the pre-funeral home.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
We warehouse our seniors or our dying people and just wait for them to die. Other cultures bring them home and surround them with family and friends. This Indian guy said his mom, it was his grandmother that passed. She had 9 children, the grandmother did. And his mom, they brought all the family around and she still wouldn't let go. Because I remember when my mom was passing, hospice said they hold on until they get what they want.
Right. I've heard that.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a bit.
Yeah. And so he said that his mom read her holy book to her. And it took her 2 weeks, I think. And when she got to the end, the grandma passed away.
She got what she needed.
Yep.
Yep. So what's one thing you could say to people right now who are grieving heavily? If you could offer one piece of advice, and of course we want them to grab your ebook as well, but one piece of advice, Renay, that you would give, what would that be? My piece of advice, and I had to do this yesterday, just yesterday, because that was Dejanay's birthday. That was my niece's birthday. What would Dejanay want me to do? Remember, people used to wear those, what would Jesus do bracelets? So I said, what would Dejanay want me to do? Would she want me to grieve her after 3 years? Would she want me to really be sad that she's gone? And I don't force my religion on anybody or my beliefs. People have to believe what they are taught to believe or what they choose to believe. Right. So, but I have to look at the person who passed away. I know my niece, she was extremely giving. And I wish I had time to tell you what happened when we were going to donate her organs. I wish that story would blow your mind. She would not want us all around here just grieving. Right. And so I would tell anybody who is really grieving, think about the person that you're grieving. How do you think, or what advice would they give you? Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, it's simple, hard to do maybe for a lot of people, but that really is, honestly, we do have to look at it that way. What would they want me to do? How would they want me to act? Yeah. Yeah. I think that my niece, because the way if she had lived, she would have been paralyzed. She would not have wanted to live like that. No, who would really? I mean, but they hang on so that we can look at them. Is that fair to them? No. And with medicine being so advanced now, we can save almost, we can save so many more people now than we could years ago. But maybe, is that the best choice? Quality of life. That's what the doctor. That's right. Yeah. Well, Renay, it has been awesome to have you as my guest on the podcast today. Tell us once again how people can find you. Well, they can find me on Facebook. The group is called Living with Loss, Let Them RIP. The email address is help@livingwithloss, Well, good. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your story. I know you have a million other stories because your life has been so fascinating. We might have to do a part 2 where you can share more death and dying stories, like crazy stories. I mean, I love stories like that, especially if they're inspirational, strange things that have happened. And so I would love to maybe revisit that. Okay. So we'll plan on that, but thank you so much. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for listening. And please, if you enjoyed the program today, please feel free to share. I appreciate you. Get out there and start living your best damn life. Until next time, take care.